Welcome back to the studio. Do you remember when you were a kid and you would have a snow day? Now maybe this doesn't apply to some of you, but think about any day off of school, maybe with your mom or dad home. Snow days was the big one for us here up north. We would just relax and do kind of fun things in the house. Well, today, for me, outside, it's a wet and gloomy day today, but that rain is going to turn to ice and then turn to snow. And so it's kind of a perfect day for me to get to this video, which I have been working towards for a couple months. I started doing table runners when I found them on the Urban Elements website. I wish I had found them a little bit sooner because they would have been really great as Christmas gifts, but I can always start Christmas gifts for next year or this year. This particular one is called Winter, and it is by Jessica Schick. It is designed to sew out the perfect size table runner. It even includes the outside perimeter that you could then cut off around and put your binding on. I have not cut mine to size yet or put my binding on it. I'll show you why in a minute. The next one I did, you can see that this one's a little bit faint, but still looks very good up close, would be great on the table. This one I did with couching, and I couched it with variegated thread. It was just a fairly inexpensive acrylic thread, or yarn, sorry. I couched it with yarn. The way that this works is you would load the machine up just as normal, just as I did for this table runner. I have the white batting, backing, and the binding, or backing, batting, and top. And I just stitched through it with my regular isocord thread. I didn't even change the thread from this setup. But there is a special couching foot, and the yarn gets fed through the couching foot and gets stitched down along with the design. So you can see this one's much bolder. And because the yarn was variegated, you do get a change of color. I wish it had been a little bit more variegated, a little bit quicker, to get even more colors, but I'm happy with the way this turned out. This one I didn't really have any problems with. I did two subsequent samples with a different kind of yarn. The yarn was more like 3 or 4 strands together, and that was even a cheaper yarn, but that one didn't seem to do as well. It seemed like there was a lot of places where the yarn did not get captured by the stitching, and so it was loose. So the little bit fluffier, fatter yarn worked better, but not so fat that it wouldn't fit through the foot. It looked like more of one, just one mesh of filaments rather than strands. So that one worked much better. But today what we're going to do is we're going to color. And I'm going to be using these. This is a brand called Tsukineko. It has a funny spelling. We do not sell these, so don't look for these on our website. Some local quilt shops will have them. If you can't find them on your local quilt shop, you could certainly get these at Amazon, and at Dharma Trading has a pretty good collection. They sell them as individual bottles, and they also sell these trays at different places. The trays are designed to hold the ink. It's an all-purpose ink, and for each ink it has 2 holes for the different types of nibs. One of them is a sharp point, and the other one's a rounded bullet point. And they just give you different effects. But to be perfectly honest, I almost always use the bullet or the sharp tip point when I'm using them. So I'm going to bring the camera in closer so we can get a look at the ink, at the tips, at the packaging, and some of the other things that I do with ink. And then we're going to get to coloring in this sample that I've already stitched out with the winter design on it. So let's come on in. This is what the bottles look like. It's an all-purpose ink for Fantastics is what it said. The brand name is Tsukineko, and I have been using these for quite a while. I first found these at the Houston International Quilt Show, and there was a booth set up that was using these, and they use them in a wide variety of methods. We're only going to be using one method today, and that's straight out of the bottle. These are the pens that work with the ink, and this particular set is the brush tip, which is the pointed one. And I buy these. They're not very expensive, and mostly it's because I lose track of which pen goes for each ink. The way that this works is you get for every color you would have a pen associated with that. And what I did with my label maker was make little labels for each of my pens so I could keep track. So like this one's a number 16, so it goes with this particular ink, number 16. And I would have two types of pens for each ink. Some of them are a rounded tip, and some of them are a point. Oh, that's a rounded tip also. Some of them are a point. The nice thing about this is that after you're done using them, I just wipe off some of the excess, and then I put it in the holder and I let it dry. It doesn't dry stiff like paint does because it's just ink. So as soon as I dip this back into the ink again, that tip is soft enough to use still. I don't have to just use single-use pieces. So that's what makes this really nice. And sometimes I keep track of the lids and sometimes I don't. The problem is for me, these fall on the floor and I step on them and then they crunch. But the lid really isn't necessary because there's no fear of these drying out, because they will dry out, but they still are usable. So that's the great thing. I've only pulled out one tray of these. I think I've got 4 or 5 trays. Ever since I was a kid, I like to have as many colors as possible. So when I was buying crayons, I wanted the biggest crayon set. When I was buying colored pencils, I would buy the largest set, and then if I could, I would add to it any other colored pencils that weren't missing. Now, I know very well that you can mix colors to get different colors, but for some reason, that full spectrum was inspirational to me. I always like to see it. So I always go overboard and buy every color I can find of something, which sometimes is a problem for storage. Some of the things that I do with the ink are mostly faces and hands, but that's certainly not all that can be done with them. But I've learned I will just do some of the outline with a Pigma pen and do real light shading to get the effect I want. And so here's another sample. This one was the first try of this particular image, and I went back and I redid the whole thing over again because I wasn't quite happy with the way the shading was coming out. So I didn't even darken the hair, but you can see the hands on here as well for that. So that's sort of an extension of what can be done with this type of ink. One of the first things that I did when I got my set was I made this color chart. And this is one of those things that I didn't really enjoy doing, but it's so useful. I use it every time I pull out my ink. I just started with the numbers and I numbered them in the order that they came. There actually wasn't like a 1 through 100. They start at like 1 and then go to 7 and up. So you're not going to get one for every single color. But what I did, I took my pen nib. For each one, I dipped it in the ink. And at the top, you can see it's a solid concentration. And then I just kept rubbing and rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. So you get more of a spectrum of value of each color that was available. And then I just let them dry. You can heat set these with the iron. They're permanent. These will not bleed if you wash them. But after I did that, I put them in these sheet protectors, and these hang on the wall right where I do my ink work. And they even have some metallic colors. I will tell you with these metallics, because of the metallic nature of that. Those nibs do tend to dry out and become stiff, and so with the gold and silver, generally I have to use a new pen each time, but I only use these on special occasions. So this is like a really great grab chart to give you color references for when you're working on a project. So that's basically all of the background for these inks. So the next thing to do is just to pull one out. So I'm going to look at my color chart. I had one picked out the other day. I think it was, maybe it was 38. 38 here. I thought this would be a good color for the snowman and maybe some of the snowflakes. But if I wanted to, I could even pull in some of that silver. But I'll have to go upstairs for that. But I'm going to pull out my 38. I have the top of each of the inks with a magic marker, a Sharpie, so that I can find it easily. It actually is written on the front here, but I can barely see that even with my glasses. So I think there's like a little ball in there, and I just like to shake up the ink when I'm going to use it in case it's done any settling. Let's see if I can find a 38 pen. If not, I'm just going to open a new one. Oh, that's 21. So I'm going to open up a new pen nib for this one. The pen for this color is probably upstairs because I pulled it off of a different tray. And I'm going to have to get a pair of scissors. So I have my little snowman here. I could get as nitpicky as I want, but I just want to start and show you how this works. So I have the ink open and I have my new nib. So I'm just going to stick the tip in the ink until I have some ink on the end of the nib. I don't need to go all the way up to the plastic. It's going to happen sooner or later, but it's not my goal. And this is a scrap piece of fabric that I'm going to use to dry off the ink. Now, I could certainly go in at this intensity, but I don't want my table runner to look like a cartoon. So I'm just going to keep rubbing off some of this excess ink until I get down to a shade that I'm comfortable with. And I really just want to give this a hint of color. I don't want it to look childish at the first go. And the nice thing about this, you can see here where I'm overlapping what I've done already. You can always add more and darken it where you want to. Also, you can get different effects by how much pressure you apply. So I'm just going to come in and start giving a little bit of color. When I have a round shape, I can make more circular motion. I'm not really going to get any color on the carrot right now because I'm using blue. And I just, because I'm working on a curved shape, his head, then I'm going to try and have a little bit of a curved motion there. And I mean, you can go as far or as sparse as you want on this and just have it be very light shading to as dark as you want. And I'm just going to continue doing this until I have as much color as I want. And remember, you can always step back and add more, but you're not going to be able to take any away. And this is very much just like coloring a coloring book, like doodling, or even like some of the new adult coloring books. And after you get this done, remember, I can add more colors. I could add orange for the nose, a tan for the arms. I could add a nice black, but maybe it would just be a very light charcoal gray to add some color on the hat. I could also use this same blue just to do a little bit of coloring on the snowflake. And you could do a variety of these snowflakes in slightly different shades of blue just to give you the effect of the individuality of each snowflake. I mean, there's nothing to say that they even have to be blue. They're just blue in my world. In your world, your snowflakes could certainly be pink. But you could see that this process is fairly simple to do. We have a star on top of the Christmas tree, and certainly that could be a nice gold. So I'm going to go ahead and quit there on the blue and pull out a different color. I think because we only have a tiny bit of orange for the carrot nose, I'm going to go ahead and do that next. And sometimes when I shake up the ink, I get a nice quantity on the lid. And really that is sufficient for doing a small color. That's all I needed. Now some of you may be thinking, wow, this is something I could do with the kids. And I think you would be right. What color did I decide? I think 66. This is the shading I'm going to use on the Christmas tree. And that's going to be a lot more ink than was on here because it's a much bigger piece. Don't remember 16 if I have used a tab for that. Number 10 is also pretty. Also, I've got this one. That would be a little bit more acidic on that Christmas tree, and I could do that at the other end if I wanted. I'm going to see if I can pick up enough color just from the lid. But I'm going to have to get the ink tip in the well sooner or later because this tree is going to take a lot more color. You could practice with different stroke motions. I'm going to leave this edging white to see if it gives the effect of snow on the tips. And you could either just leave these empty or color them as if they were bulbs or lights or ornaments. And I will tell you that sometimes you really do have to step back, because up close it looks like it is much darker. I'm barely touching the fabric at this point. And something like this would be a really good way to practice with these inks to get to know what they do. It's kind of dark here on this bottom edge, and so I could darken up this bottom edge as well, just so that there's a little bit of symmetry in there. By creating this symmetry with that, it makes that look intentional. So sometimes if you have a mistake that you can't erase, the best thing to do is repeat it and make it look like it was a design decision. And because I've got multiple shades of green, I really could go with a different color green in each tier. But I'm going to go ahead and just leave it with this single shade. I have a whole nother tree at the other end. And if I wanted to do an additional color of green, I certainly could do that. Just remember every time you get ink to test on a scrap piece of fabric, or I could have tested out here on this one, which is why I left that on there until I'm finished, to get the effect of ink intensity that I want. I've pretty much used all the ink on my lid. So now I'm going to go to the bottle, and now I really will have to brush off some of that excess ink. Now if you have a specific look, you certainly could go with a much darker shading. You know what you're trying to accomplish. It's only you have the vision in your head. So it's nice to get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea. For some of you, maybe a glass of wine. It would be nice to have the kids and some hot chocolate. Sometimes it's not about getting perfection, it's about the memory that you create. And then as the kids grow up, they will remember that they made this with their mom or their dad or their grandmother or grandfather. And it's about the memory that they made, not so much about the value of a tablecloth. As I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, wow, this is maybe a little bit darker than what I wanted. But I know that I'm sitting right on top of this, so I have to keep that in account. Time for a tea break. That's good. Since I'm here at the star, I'm going to go ahead and do this little bit of yellow. Of course, my biggest fear always with working with this ink is, guess what? Knocking over my little bottle. It's never happened, because I try and pay very close attention to where the bottle's located and where I'm working. Also, it's nice to keep it in the little carrier if you have them. And now that I see this yellow star, I'm really thinking these should be different colors, like they were ornaments. But I do want to keep this white as if it were snow. I tried to bring down what would primarily be primary colors, primary or secondary colors for this particular project, because there's a lot of different shades of things, but I don't really need 1414. This is the correct pen. Again, you can see I've used this before and it's perfectly soft still, and I can just go ahead and pick up the ink with it. And I know when I shade this out, it's going to become more pink. But that's okay, because sometimes I just want the effect of color, the reference of a color. Now, I will say, as we're working on this, this looks kind of like a novelty project, and in a way it certainly is. But that's not the only use for these particular tool. You could apply whatever kind of finesse you wanted to this, and you could do a really beautiful project inking in feathers. And you could ink them in as light or as dark as you wanted, and get a totally different effect. And this is certainly not the only way to use these inks. Some people would use them, they would mix it a little bit, like equal parts of this ink with aloe vera gel. And some people might even use a brush instead of these nibs. The aloe vera gel just kind of works as a medium and helps to make it even more translucent, still maintains a very supple feel on the project when you're finished, but it does give you a different look. I've seen people do put them in a little spray bottle with alcohol, regular rubbing alcohol, maybe like the 91%, equal parts, and then you'll use the spray bottle and spray the ink on something in the same way that you would like a paint or spray paint. You could do it and get spackles, or you could cut a template out of freezer paper and iron it onto the fabric, and then spritz it over around the edges and pull it away, and it works like a stencil. So there are lots of different ways to use this particular ink. This is just the most straightforward way. So now I'm going to go to a different color, and maybe 20. Let me see what 20 looks like. 20's here. 20 and 21 might both be good. We'll see if we have a purple shade down here, because I want to go ahead and fill in the rest of these ornaments. That 18 is really pretty. I do have 18. Again, with the amount of ink that I would need for just these little ornaments, I can come in with just enough from the lid. And I think No, I'm not going to do it. I was going to do the scarf. One of the problems I come up against, actually kind of often, is that I love to work with these inks, for instance, but I don't work with them every day. Sometimes months go by and I haven't pulled them out. And it's a matter of practicing with something before you get really good at it. And you get rusty, so maybe if you wanted to, if you were working on a project like this, you'd have a practice piece first, just to get your hand back in the game. Putting a little bit of the purple from his scarf on the band of his hat for whatever color I decide to make that later. I'm going to have to move the camera here in a minute because I'm pretty sure I'm off the camera now. But I want to go ahead and finish the last of the ornaments with different colors on this particular tree. On some of these, I'm coloring in different places that are actually enclosed, like a fully enclosed shape of this scarf, or the eyes or the nose. But sometimes you could start in an area that starts to be enclosed, like the swirl of this, and then just let the ink fade out where it doesn't end. If I do these two, I think that was down here. What is this? This one's 38. You're going to get a slightly different effect with the bullet end or the sharp brush tip end, but they both work. They both do their job. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit and step back and look at it, and then we'll move to the other end. We're not quite halfway done. We have a couple more snowflakes here. And I think I might go ahead and make one of my snowflakes more of a teal color, but very light. That's very dark. Now we're getting down to a lighter color, I can just do a light touch here. It's kind of a fun thing about this is that you really get to study the design itself and really appreciate the design work of the person who created it. I believe this one is a Jessica Schick design called Winter. Again, this is kind of a novelty project. We have a snowman and some snowflakes and a Christmas tree. But you can take as much time as you want with it. But this same methodology could be used in shading a really beautiful applique quilt where you have feather quilting in the background. You could also just use the ink itself to shade fabric in an applique to give you more of an effect of dimension. And because I've done a little bit of that over there, I'm going to balance it out by putting a little bit of this teal turquoisey color on one of the swirls over here. I get to decide where the color goes. Only person it has to make any sense to is me. And the lighter and lighter you go, the more the effect that it is just, and you know, almost imaginary that it's there. I don't know that I want to put brown on my branches, so I think I might use this green. The green from the tree, I think. Now, it's not going to be every day that I'm going to want to color in my panto. But it's nice to have a new tool. And I don't know too many people that don't enjoy coloring. I love to color. I don't think I have near enough time coloring. And as I said before, I don't remember what I said before. It's a rainy day, so what could be bad about this, coloring on a rainy day? I almost feel like making that snowflake a little bit purple. I don't know how much ink is left on from the purple from before. And all of these pieces that I'm coloring, you may notice that I'm just using a little bit of shading from the ink to color them in. But I could certainly come back any one of these and add a little bit of a different color just to get a little bit of a different effect. I was just reading this morning about a woman who can see over 100,000 different colors. She's an artist and she paints art pieces with the colors that she actually sees in them. So we could do the same thing, really. If my imagination sees a color, then I could go ahead and use that color. I just opened up the wrong bottle and stuck my pen in there, and it was the blue, not the purple. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish out this section of the snowflake in blue. And if any of you are interested, you could leave a comment about how you feel about coloring, why you like quilting, if you hated this video. Don't say that. You'll make me cry. I like that. We have blue to purple. That's a good one. I kind of like that. I think I'm going to shade some of the other ones with two tones. Eventually, when you use one of these brush tips too long, you kind of bend the end of it. Some of the felting wears off. But these packages of nibs are pretty cheap. They have those available at the big box craft stores for sure, but you can always order more. I always order extra or get extra when I see them, especially if I have a coupon for 50% off or something, because that's the time you want to hit it. And I think I'm probably going to have to go up and get a gray for the eyes and the hat, because I don't like the way that looks. And I haven't decided on the buttons. Those could be gray also, but I don't want a big gray snowman. So I'm going to flip the camera one more time and move the remainder of my table runner so it's facing you, and we'll get this finished up. I know sometimes as adults, sometimes even as kids, we don't want to try something new because we don't want to be bad at it. And it isn't until you're bad at something that you could actually get good at it. Nobody started as a professional the first time they did something. It's not Thomas Edison, not Michelangelo, not Salvador Dali or Van Gogh. You have to build skills, and so in that way you have to be bad to be good. And some of you may not like the finished piece of this today, and I've been doing it for a little while, but you get better, and the only way to get better is to practice and play. And you can get all kinds of different effects with these tools. You don't have to do it the same way I do it. When I see a shape, I try and give it some of the characters that the shape would have. Like this hat would be round on the top, so I try and do those in swirls on the curved edges especially. And that gives the effect that it's curved. And then from these two edges, I know it's rounded in the front. So I'm going to start on the outside edge and try and do curved lines coming in, just to give the effect of having curves. And I don't necessarily have to shade the whole thing in. I could start on the outside and shade it, and then leave the center a little bit with less value or less color in it to give the effect of a highlight. So I don't even have to color that whole piece in. And in that way, the mind gives the illusion that something's dimensional or highlighted, when in fact there isn't really anything on there. It's a 2D object. So I'm going to go ahead and do my snowman again. I think that was number 38. But I'm using blue. You could certainly use pink if you wanted a pink snowman. Give yourself permission to do it in any way that you want. You could make off a couple of these and have some of your friends over, your adult friends over, and just have one set of ink, and you could each take turns with a color. You could make one of these for each of your extended family units and have them come over and do a project, and then they could take it home. You could have the table runners all finished with the binding on it and just let them color it and take it home. Certainly a quilt shop could have something like this, do like a little make it and take it. Somebody could make the table runners, and they could just have a base charge for each table runner, and then the students could come in, spend a few hours inking in this particular case. But this is certainly not the only way to color on fabric. This is just the way that we're showing today, and it won't be the last time that you see me coloring on here, because I play with a lot of different methods of inking or coloring on fabric. Some of my color choices today are pretty basic, but again, we're just kind of showing a technique of coloring in on a pre-stitched out design. So you can stay tuned for other ones in this little table runner series. I have 2 more projects that I want to do with table runners, or tabletop items, maybe even 3. So let's see, we have the orange for the carrot. Wonder if there's enough ink left. My pen has been sitting in the receptacle since I did the nose on the last one, and I didn't even have to re-ink that. There was enough ink there. I'm going to see if the case is the same for the yellow for the star. I kind of liked that star to be kind of a bright yellow, and this is, I don't think so much it's dried out as I used it up. So I'm going to bring my yellow back out. I quite like the yellow to be kind of nice, a strong color. And I used the more forest green at the other end. I think for this end I'm going to use that number 10, that more citrus acid green. That's going to liven up this end of the table. I just wonder, really, if you got the kids involved, what color they would make things. I'm going to do kind of strong at the bottom here to give my tree trunk nice firm ground. And then I can lighten up a little bit on the inside. Remember, I did these curves on the right and left a little bit stronger. And I'm still going to leave my little tiny scallop white as if it's snow. There's all types of digital designs that we have on the website that would lend themselves to coloring. Certainly you could color just about anything, but these novelty things that we have, cowboy boots, hats, butterflies, birds, ballerina slippers. Oh my goodness, the Halloween stuff that we have, spider webs, spiders, jack-o'-lanterns, fall leaves. The possibilities really are endless on what you could color. Be brave, try something new today. If you've been cooped up in the house, you could feel liberated to order some new art supplies. We could call them educational art supplies because you're learning and you're teaching the kids a new skill, even if the kids are 34. I had a little black mark there and here. I'm not sure where that came from. I don't know that I drug my black ink there, but I'm going to go over that with some dark green. The ink is opaque, but if I put some darker streaks there, I think it will cover that up. I'd have to watch the video to see when it appeared, which I can't do right now. This particular little tree kind of reminds me of The Grinch Stole Christmas. That's what it is. Maybe it's this particular shade of green. I'm just putting in a little bit darker streaks of the green at full intensity, and I'm hoping that will just kind of camouflage that little bit of green or black streak there that I'm not even sure where it came from. But maybe you will make these much, much darker than I did. It doesn't really matter how dark you make it. The fabric is still going to stay soft afterwards. When you're done with this, you could just let it dry and then run an iron over it to heat set it, and then it's washable. Again, these are all-purpose inks by Tsukineko. It's spelled funny. It's a Tsukineko, I believe. But I will write it in the description. If I was allowed, I'd have Christmas music playing. But I always get into trouble when I put music on. Now we can do our bulbs. What do we have left? Scarf, bulbs, arms. I wonder if anyone has stayed with me through the whole video. I could do an orange one this time. I did red on the last one. I'm just trying to get some of these finished. Try some purple. That looks like the black one. There's two black ones. I'm just going to grab, well, that's the blank ink, no wonder. I want purple. Do my branch. Now look, I got a stain on there. I got a smudge here and here. I'm going to spritz some glitter on that. There is, this is called Sheer Shimmer Spritz. The color is Frost. And I'm going to spritz some of this on. This really isn't going to cover anything, but it's going to give a sparkle to the top. So when the light catches that, is going to sparkle a little bit. What did I have left? I just have the scarf. I'm going to do the scarf in the red. Okay, I'm calling it quits. I think I've got it as far as I can go. Oh. Well, that's the end of my little coloring lesson today. Trying to color your world, color in the lines a little bit. What we started off with was plain white cotton that we stitched out the winter table runner pattern on. I used a variegated thread, and then I used that stitching pattern as the basis for coloring. Now this is sort of a novelty project because I'm coloring in snowmen, Christmas trees, and ornaments, snowflakes, swirls. But this is just to show you that you can use these all-purpose inks on fabric, even on a completely quilted project. If my workstation was a little bit neater, I probably wouldn't have gotten a little smudge on my table runner. If I was really worried about that, you really can't get the ink out once it's dry, so there's no point in trying to get it out. But you could come back over with maybe white fabric paint and paint over a smudge, or put some beads or crystals on there just to detract from it. It's not going to bother me that much. It's very little. But we have the finished project. You can see the two ends are very different. The effect that I got with different colors and different intensity of color. So it really all depends on how strong or weak you want it to be. It really could just be very light shading. If you're working on applique, you could use the all-purpose ink just to shade in some dimension or depth in your applique. You could do quilted feathers, a quilted wreath, and use the ink very light-handed or very heavy-handed depending on your outcome, just to give the quilting some dimension. So it's really, to me, a fun thing to do. It was a fun project. I'm going to be doing some other coloring methods in the future with different products, not necessarily products that we carry, but just different things that you could do with your quilting to add a little extra tool to your tool belt. So I want to thank you for stopping by today. I hope you enjoyed the coloring with the Tsukineko all-purpose ink. Again, you can find it on Amazon or Dharma Trading, or some of your local quilt stores will have it because they also do inking in some of their classes. So if you have any questions, let us know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the video and the process. And thanks for stopping by. We'll see you again next time here in the studio.